So Sandi has given up her time this morning to join us for a quick chat, all about her career, the construction industry, the CIOB, and all kinds of other things. So hopefully the next half an hour will be interesting, enlightening, and fun. So Sandi Rhys Jones, for those who don't know her already, began her career in the 1970s, much like myself. Only I was only being born in the 70s, where Sandi was working. So working for a variety of technical organizations, then set up a management and marketing business. Very much an advocate for construction and its contribution to society. She's worked both as an employer and non-executive director. In her day job, she helps organizations find innovative ways to improve performance and develop new business. Sandi also developed and delivers cross-disciplinary national mentoring program at Women in Property, and leads on public affairs there. So she was also appointed OBE in 1998, which I was reading this just now. I was like, 1998. I was still at university in 1998. Sorry.
No, don't say that. At least you haven't said you weren't born then.
Yes.
That gets really depressing.
I've got colleagues who weren't born then. And that was for her work in promoting women in construction, which is something I think we'll touch on in the next half an hour. Also a fellow of the CIOB and a fellow of the Women's Engineering Society, and trained as a mediator after completing an MSc in construction law. So, which is interesting because quite a lot of my old colleagues did the MSc at King's College, which is where Sandi studied. We were chatting about this the other day. And one of the nice things about that we were saying is that it brings people from all sides of the industry together. So you have lawyers and you have industry people working on site and all kinds of different people all working together to get the MSc in construction law. And I know there's definitely a few people on this call today who are going through that process or have been through that process. So that was an interesting point. Sandi also has another connection to Limeslade, or a loose, tenuous connection, which I'll throw in, is the Welsh connection. So for those of you who are looking at me on the screen and wondering why I've got a picture of Mumbles in the background, the Limeslade Lighthouse, Limeslade Bay, is a beach in Mumbles, just along the end of Swansea Bay. And the lighthouse in our logo is Mumbles Lighthouse. So, and Sandi Rhys Jones's family also have a Welsh connection. I think on your husband's side, was it?
Yes, right? I'm Welsh by acquisition.
There we go. So thank you very much indeed for joining us. Thank you to Sandi for joining in. And let's start with some questions. So I think we start at the beginning. And what were things like in the industry when you started, and what's changed for the better or the worse? Do we think things are better?
Oh, things are better. There's no doubt things are better, mainly, I think, because there is an openness to talk about the things that aren't better. And that, I think, is the significant change. When I started, I got perfectly accustomed to being the only woman in the room, whether it was 1,000 people at a FIDIC annual conference, or if it was, the MSc at construction law, actually, when I was mature when I did that. But there were 2 women out of 40. And now I don't know quite what the latest figures are, but it's probably 50-50. But I think the difference is that people now talk about it. I used to say that if I was asked to give a presentation on the need to increase the number of women or increase diversity in the industry, it was a guarantee to clear a conference hall. You could clear a conference hall in a nanosecond by saying, I'm now going to speak about the importance of diversity in the built environment. So my response to that was not to talk about improving diversity in the built environment, but do a presentation called Age, Sex and Leadership, or Dirty, Dangerous and Dominated by Macho Men. And they usually hung around to hear about that. So it's one of my tips, actually, is to go down, round and under. And if you need to get into dialogue on tricky subjects or sensitive subjects, find a way of engaging the conversation so you can then have it. So I think the change has been a willingness. We're moving from, if we're talking about gender, we're talking about diversity. I think there is, we've now moved on from the why are we talking about it to how do we do it. But I think actually, Stuart, what's important for me to say is that I'm in the industry because I love the industry. You know, the women's stuff came along partly because I am one and partly because there weren't many of us. And once you get involved, you see the need to change. But I think things have changed in the industry for the better in many ways in terms of performance, some circumstances, some surrounding conditions, we still have a way to go on making the most of the fact that it's a brilliant industry. But I think that's changing for the better. So there have been changes, and there are changes. We need to keep going, and we'll talk more about some of those specific things later, if you like. But it is different, and I think it is for the better.
Yeah, definitely. I think one of the challenges we faced at London CIOB is that concept of talking about diversity and inclusion. As you say, it's still a challenging thing. People go, well, why do we need to talk about that? And we did a really good talk a few years ago where we said, and again, the topic was construction. Where are we? How did we get here? And what's next? I think was something like that. And we didn't present it as a diversity and inclusion thing, but it came up in the conversation. We had really brilliant women on the panel, talking about their experiences. I think one was the current president at the time, and another was the winner of Construction Manager of the Year that year, and the other was a person called Anjali Pandoria, who you may
yes,
really good advocate for those kind of all of those issues. So yeah, and it was just a really interesting conversation about careers in construction, as you say, rather than the whole, no, this is diversity and this is inclusion, blah blah blah. So yeah, that's very important. Well,
I was going to say another example. It must be. The trouble I have now, as you've highlighted, is I've been around so long that when I say a few years ago, that translates into about 20. But anyway, a few years ago, I was offered an opportunity to set up a panel on an international construction platform that was taking place here in the UK, in London, but it was being directed by a major American organization. And I was given free rein to hold a session. And it was all to do with construction performance improvement, which is what I feel strongly about. We must do as well as we can. It's all about delivering the best, and how do we do it? So I took the opportunity to have a panel that was solely women, and it was an international mix of women. And the theme was how you build a safe Olympics. And each of these 4 women had been involved in either delivering Olympic stadia, or they had been participants, or they had a policy role. And it was a really interesting session. And at the end of it, the number of male delegates who came up to me saying that was a fascinating session, but I couldn't help notice they were all women. How did that happen? So it gave me great pleasure to say, because I thought they'd be the best for the job.
Yeah.
Which was another recurring theme in this. We've got nothing against women. We just want to get the best person for the job. And I think we need to reframe that and take it as a given. Why would I employ a woman who is not good enough or fit for the job? But I'll jolly well work hard to find one who is. So it's find them. Yeah,
right. So moving on to the wider industry, obviously having such a long career in the sector, you'll have seen all sorts of, I imagine, at least 2 or 3 recessions and 2 or 3 economic downturns and things like that in the past. Do you think the current volatility in costs and the various governments that you've seen, do you think these issues that we're facing now are worse than in the past and greater than previous challenges? And how can the industry best tackle what we're seeing at the moment in terms of the economic and political challenges we're seeing?
I think this is messy at the moment. As you say, I've done 3 recessions. I kept my business running through 3 of them. The middle one was the worst. What it taught me then, and I still recommend this whenever you can. I was employer. I had a staff. I had loyal clients. I still had to shake the trees and get new clients. The one thing we vowed we would do was keep our people. We would do our utmost to keep our people. You had to have the faith of thinking, when this resolves itself and the work starts flowing, you need the team you know and have and trust, so you can hit the ground running. And that really paid off. It meant I and my partner took very little money, but we kept our team. And I think that still holds true. I know sometimes it's impossible but as far as you can, hold the team, because you need to start again. And I think whilst we're in this really volatile situation, I think politically there were the unexpected events, there were the events that I could see would have an effect, although some people didn't. I think that you do need that core team, and we have a skill shortage. I mean, how long have we been talking about skill shortages, Stuart? I mean, as long as I can remember. And we have the peaks and troughs. We have this huge problem of the construction industry being an economic regulator. And I remember being told was it the second or third recession? Must have been the third recession. Somebody saying to me, I think it's disgraceful you trying to attract women into the industry and anybody into the industry, because they're not going to have a job.
Mm.
And this was somebody working in the industry. And I said, yes, and in a couple of years' time, we'll be sitting in this same conference hall saying, how come we don't have any people to do the work?
Yeah. Mm.
So we live with that. So I think we have to communicate better. We need to have better relationships, or sustain the relationships we have on policy. We need to have realistic discussions on tendering, procurement. I mean, you remember as well as I did the whole kamikaze tendering thing, which then contributes to another economic challenge. So I think things are very challenging. How else? Of course they are. I think there are some creative solutions to some things. I think it's one of the things I'm very proud of being involved with the CIOB is because it's a broad church, it is possible to have discussions across the industry rather than hunkering down in silos.
Mm.
And the only way forward is to move forward together and have discussions on how to resolve certain things, how to manage issues. There was a CIOB conference 2 days ago. I was at the one on conservation. And there were very interesting discussions in how to talk to clients, policymakers, regulators, funders about the balance in retrofitting homes or sustaining heritage buildings to achieve net zero goals, but without causing other harm.
Mm.
How do we get that balanced, informed, consensual discussion about how we do this? Because construction's all around us. We need it. This is one of the things that I find magical. I still find it magical. That it's so much part of how we live, how we move around, how we travel, how we create wealth. And yet we seem to spend too much time protecting it and defending it against, well, it's a dirty and dangerous industry and it's always late. And it's because I think that's still there, the undertone, which is one of the challenges for our recruitment. So I think that we need to recognize how we get through the current challenges, but make sure we have the people. It's 225,000, isn't it? That's what we're saying we need. Mm. And then we need to make sure that we have the people with the skills that do the jobs that are needed, which takes us back to the whole retrofit issue. We've got all those homes that are built before 1919, 39% built before 1939. Most people live in an old house. Mm. So we need people who aren't just up to speed on BIM and modern methods of construction and offsite modular. We also need the people who build traditionally and who can combine building traditionally with doing it in a way that is sustainable. So, yeah. And I think that's actually very exciting. And I think that's where we can harness younger people, which will help address the skill shortage, because all the young people I speak to, and some of whom are related to me, are passionate about sustainability. Yeah. So how do we look outside that box, back to talking silos? How do we move from thinking, well, we need so many surveyors, so many bricklayers, so and so? How do we get the people? This is back to the right people. There are young people who may be doing social theory. They may geography. They have an interest and skills. Let's bring them in and use non-cognates so that we have this broad range of skills from different places to build the right teams to move forward.
Yeah, and I think that's one of, in fact, when we were talking last week, I wrote some notes and added some extra responses to this, and that comes back to, again, not sadly, that's the wrong word, but that does come back to the diversity point, doesn't it? Is that if you don't have all these people from different backgrounds, you don't have people with different understandings of how things work in life, and then you won't get the range of skills and the range of knowledge that you need. And as you say, the wonderful thing, I've worked with two organisations on the kind of institution side of things, so Constructing Excellence and CIOB, both of which, as you say, are really broad churches. But and it's really nice to see when we get together with Constructing Excellence and CIOB groups, seeing all the different perspectives, because people come at it from different angles. You've got, an architect, an engineer, a quantity surveyor, and they've all got very different perspectives, but it's really nice to see when we get them together, the conversations in the room. Whereas if you only focus on one particular area, you only get one conversation. Again, that's the collaboration, and diversity and inclusion doesn't just mean people of color or people, women and things like that. It's the whole diversity and inclusion needs to cover everything. And that's a conversation I had with one of my clients, is you're really diverse. It's like, no, we're not, we're all white and male. It's like, well, there is that, but you've got so many diverse opinions, and you're the directors of this company were three very diverse people. They were, one was young, one was slightly older, one was a QS, one was a planner. There's all sorts of different people in that group, and the diversity of views and opinions amongst them was really, really interesting. So
I think it's also, I'd like to come in on that, 2 points really. One is that at one stage, well, for much of the career when I was running my business, and I worked across the industry, so I worked for major contractors, government, local government, national government, federations, specialist subcontractors, professionals, and I remember going to a meeting with a potential client, and my best researcher was a 75-year-old ex-Atkins, ex-specialist across the board, a very, very wise and delightful man. I also had one of my best executives, half Japanese, 26-ish, Oxbridge graduate, and then there was me. So we went into this meeting with Mariko, who's now got a really successful career in the States. People who work for me, I have to say, I'm sad to lose them, but boy, isn't it great to see where they've gone. And we stay in touch and we email. So it was Mariko, me in the middle, and then Martin. So we had this trio of male, female, old, young, middling, different skills, and you're then in a room, and if you've got your client right, with another cross section of people. So it is broader than that. I also, a slight correction, Stuart, I developed and ran the Women in Property Mentoring for 11 years, and I stepped back from it just this year because I'm taking on the commitments of CIOB. But to move on with that was the key thing about that program, which I really am proud of, and proud of the people who participated. Back to the broad church, we had a policy of not matching like with like. This wasn't mentoring to help you through your APC or to get your chartership. This was mentoring to help you identify and develop your career. So we would deliberately match, say, a surveyor with a client, a transport engineer with a lawyer. And that was so interesting and revealing. You don't have issues around competitiveness, and everybody begins to understand even more how you play your role in this whole structure and an understanding. It's something I pioneered at Simons. You mentioned Simons, sadly a company no longer with us, but we actually changed the female proportion in that company up to 35%. We were aiming at 50 when I was on the board there. And I did that, and I mentored our rising stars with clients. And that was transformational because there was an understanding of the construction site about the real issues that clients are juggling with and dealing with. And the clients began to realize that, okay, you want to carry on running your store in a high street while the refurb's going on, and there's nowhere to park and there's nowhere to put the inventory, and what are the realities of actually delivering this? How do we do it? So I think this is back to communication. It's back to not everybody sitting in their own place. And also you bring in these other understandings, what it's like. When I was on the Docklands Light Railway Board as a non-exec, being a non-exec is brilliant, actually. The Docklands Light Railway was brilliant engineering, fantastic executive, but there were a cross-section of us, some of whom had the experience of going to town in the rush hour with 2 kids and a buggy, or a visitor to the UK wondering how on earth they buy a ticket, to people saying, hey, there's no driver. Where do I go if there's a problem? So that's another element of how we deliver a better product in our industry, is hearing those voices or engage those people who aren't the normal or not the traditional. Traditional person.
What I must do, well, before I forget, is to remind people, if you've got questions for Sandi, do pop them into the Q&A. We've got 2 already, which is brilliant. We'll come to those towards the end. I'm very conscious of time, so we must move on. The next question involves me doing this, so just bear with me. I'm just going to share this screen very briefly. You'll get your back. When I was researching this session, I put Sandi Rhys Jones into Google and tried to find out all sorts of things, what she'd been up to during her career. And one of the major things that came up in Building Magazine was the advert on the left-hand side, the skill builders searching for talent. I actually looked at this and I was like, wow, I'm not sure this would ever happen today. This was a few years ago, obviously. But that was Construction Skills looking to get more apprentices, not more female apprentices, strangely. I was doing a little bit of reading around it yesterday. That advert was put together by a female marketing executive in Construction Skills at CITB, so and which is not unusual, actually. It very often is the females marketing people that end up doing things like this, and I think the excuse was that they were trying to appeal to their membership, which was mostly men. And on the right hand side is more recently was a certain UK trade fair for construction industry, and they had the Vegas Girls promoting one of their exhibitors, and again that didn't go down too well. So I just thought I'd bring that up as a little visual aid, and I shall stop that now so you can all have your screens back.
Yes, thank you.
That's quite enough of that. So I guess the question being, so this was something that obviously Sandi was not an advocate of at the time.
There was a very robust conversation with CITB at a very high level about that, actually, Stuart.
Yeah, exactly. And the story in Building Magazine goes into some detail about what that conversation was and how it all panned out. However, my question now is, do we think are we getting better since those days? Have we improved since that headline? And I'm hoping you're going to say yes.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. And I think there was a wolf whistling issue as well, wasn't there? And as you say, when that debate came up, a number of women said, well, if I walk past a site and nobody whistles, I'm worried. So you have to have these discussions to unpick it. No, I think that change has happened. You don't get the overt advertising. There is a recognition, apart from anything else. I mean, gosh, she didn't have the right PPE, did she? But that's another story which I'm deeply involved in at the moment, which is getting proper PPE. That's changed. I think people are very conscious of their language. I think there are more subtle things now. I mean, that's overt and that's obvious. And I think it helps that quite a number of senior men in the industry have wives who actually have a life apart from being arm candy, and daughters who want to do something significant with their lives rather than just get married. So you have that demographic change as well. I think one of the important things that's happened is an openness to men saying we're not putting up with stuff. And on a serious note, actually, Stuart, if I might, I think it's very significant that we've moved from an industry that kills you, having really addressed health and safety and fatalities, and improved that we've now shifted to an industry where you kill yourself. And I feel that there really is a huge need to recognise this unacceptable rate of suicide amongst men working on site. And put very simplistically, and I know this is backed up by research, then the reason that there is such a high level of mental stress that leads to suicide or attempted suicide is because the conditions are bad. They're either physically bad, or the work, the 24/7, there's a feeling of a lack of respect for what they do. And these are all the reasons I would often be told was why it was wrong for me to encourage women into construction, because it was accepted that it was dirty and dangerous, and there's always toilets. We might as well get toilets out of the way. There are no toilets for women. Well, there were no toilets for men either, so I think that there has been a shift. So we've moved away from the page 3 stuff and the Wolfers and the overt sexism. We now need to say, this is a people thing, and we need to improve circumstances. If you improve those, you improve them for all. So you have decent working conditions, you manage sites, you recognize, and very quickly, I know you want to move on, but I mustn't forget this. For many years, I've tried to find another word as an alternative to professionals in the industry. And who are the others? Trade and craft, site workers, or the professionals and the others. So they're not professional. And I've always taken the view that I want a professional fixing my heating. I want a professional doing the brickwork or whatever it is. Mm-hmm. And I think this is back to the silo. And one of the things that apparently worried men on site was the feeling they weren't recognized for what they did, because they were just doing the site stuff. So the theme for CIOB, modern professionalism, to me opens the door on talking about what we mean about doing a good job. And it's professionalism with a small p. You do a good job, whether you're operating the crane, or you're mixing the cement, or you're doing the M&E design. And that, I think, is really important. And that will be that will make a lot of difference to people feeling proud of what they do, and then getting the respect for what they do.
Yeah. Brilliant. Thank you. Disappointingly, we do try and cram these into half an hour. So I'm going to move to the final question. So obviously your term of presidency is coming up at the CIOB. How long is it that you're there, and what are your hopes for your time as president and for the industry generally? I know we can't go into too much detail because some of it's got to be revealed when you become president, which is later this year. But what are your hopes for the industry and your time during your presidency, perhaps?
Well, one of the beauties of the CIOB presidential process is that you have a year as a vice president, and then a year as a senior vice president, which I'm currently in. I become president in June, the end of June. So it's approaching fast, and I'm not worried about this. It'll be fine. But that period of time gets you into familiarizes you with the teams involved, with the people involved, and you begin to have an understanding of what's entailed. And very importantly, this is where non-exec experience helps. You recognize as president, you're a non-executive. You have your role as a president, but you have a team of really, really good qualified executive, and they are a great team. So there's a year, which doesn't seem long, but you've had some build-up time. What I would like to see is real joined up thinking, and which we've begun at CIOB. We have a memorandum of understanding with the other major institutions, and we sit round tables. And I think that is really important. I think the brilliant thing about my upcoming year is there are so many women. All the other presidents of the major institutions, with the exception of the RIBA, have got women, some of whom I know. There are women CEOs. And I think that circumstance, for the first time, gives us an opportunity to shift the dialogue. So I think there'll be a shifting in dialogue. I think this concept of modern professionalism, where we recognize and can reach out and communicate with people, that will address the three core things in our corporate plan. I'm very fortunate coming in as president as we've launched a new corporate plan for 5 years, which is very clear. We need to sort out people, skills gaps. We need to really address quality and safety. And that's everything, quality and safety and sustainability, as well as environmental sustainability, which I'm passionate about, net zero carbon, all that. It's sustainability of our industry. We need to secure it with the people, with the way we operate, with the people we talk to. We need to engage not only with policymakers, which is really important because they have the levers of power, but we also need to engage with all the people we don't actually talk to directly. We need to tell our story on the unexpected stage. I said to one of the team, I want to be talking in unexpected places. I don't want only to talk to the industry.
Yeah. And that's, as you say, it's one of Andy Stanley, who's currently chair in London. He's always talking about the importance of talking not to the church, but to the unconverted, if you like, the people
absolutely.
that don't agree or aren't listening or aren't engaged at the moment, and going out and sharing the message with people. And that's a challenge. It's all very well putting on something like this and getting the people who are interested, but So anybody who thinks of somewhere odd to go and talk, and I've done it in the past, and the best bit about that? They're so taken aback that a woman's turning up to talk about construction that they actually listen. So exploit it. Good. So we've got a few questions that have come in, mostly from one person in the Middle East, which is brilliant. So, and also that's the other thing about the CIOB is that it is this broad church. It covers all kinds of regions and places and locations. First question, I'll take them in reverse. So going back to the point about PPE, most, and this is a good point actually, most women, and as a cyclist, the other picture on the wall is bicycles. Women often struggle with cycling kit because it's not designed properly for them. And John said most women encounter improperly fitting PPE on site and challenging access to toilet facilities. Interesting, Annie, who's, as I say, is off today doing a Women in Construction Awards. One of the first things I arranged for her when she started working for me a long time ago, when she was working for me, not a joint director in the business, was to get her some site experience. And she went out to a site for a well-known house builder in South London. Oh. And they had to empty out the toilet so that she could use it because it was being used as a storeroom. Because what else would you use a female toilet for?
Better than the lift shaft.
Exactly. So, but you alluded to measure to correct that. So, are you able to elaborate and give us a bit more detail on what the PPE and that sort of thing you're working on at the moment?
Well, we've been engaged. I've been connecting with women who've raised it, and I was approached by a couple of women, and we are in the process of organising a response and an investigation to this. Watch this space. But again. You've raised cycling. It's more than cycling. Sportswomen, football boots, women's feet are differently structured to men's feet. This is a fact. I struggle if I go on site. Most helmets just rest on my nose because I happen to have a small head. Right. It's been going on too long. We are looking at it. Watch this space. Meanwhile, there are some people who are advocating very hard, but back again to the broader view, we're not just talking about construction, we're also saying this isn't a limited issue, and it's not just women. It does affect women because of the physical shape, but there are shorter men. There are people with religious issues or health issues. That means that you need to have PPE that's appropriate. I had a conversation with a woman who was delivering some stuff for me because I'm a compulsive builder. So I was in a project. I was having stuff delivered by the builder's merchant, and she turned up with a really neat sack truck. And I've been looking for a sack truck. So we had a conversation. She said, I'm not using the company sack truck. It was impossible. Too big, too heavy, difficult to maneuver. So I sourced my own. So there am I with a delivery driver exchanging views on appropriate sack trucks that women can use on site. So, but I think it's also, we want to engage other industries and other sectors. so that it's not seen as a specialist. This isn't a niche thing. So as I say, watch this space. Very soon you'll hear about something, but there are some useful people who are very active in this, and I'm hoping to get some traction.
Brilliant, thank you. Good question from Sarah Fox, and this is something that, yeah, again, it's another thing that people do occasionally push back on, and can the CIOB lobby for government to reinforce the need for retrofitting as a matter of urgency in grants? Sarah works with Manchester's Carbon Co-op and many other retrofit companies, but they need more support. And that, it comes back to something I was saying last night to another member of the CIOB, is saying, we've got, is it 47,000 members, 45,000 members? It's quite a strong voice. Can we, how do you, I mean, how should, does the CIOB have to be very selective in how it uses that voice? What's the, addressing Sarah's question specifically, but more generally, how often can you march up Whitehall and demand that things are changed and things like that? What do you think?
I feel very strongly about the importance of engaging on policy, and having been involved in one of the many improvement initiatives. You've mentioned Constructing Excellence, but I've done Latham Egan, Movement for Innovation, and so on. And the last one I was involved in, I said, can we just sit and look and see what has actually happened as a consequence of all these reports? Where are the levers of power? CIOB has a very good, strong policy team, and I have to say they're great supporters for me, and we work very well together. I have actually myself had meetings with now 3 members of Parliament, chairman of committees, and a minister. So we are finding the pegs in which to engage in the conversation. We've just produced The Real Face of Construction. I don't know whether you've had a chance to see it yet, Stuart. It came out on Monday, which has really persuasive data, because you need hard facts. Somebody said to me a little while ago, how have you managed to keep going in this industry? And how have you managed to keep going with the issues that you particularly take up as well as running a business? And I had to think for a minute, and my answer was hard facts and a sense of humor. You have to keep cool. You have to keep positive. It doesn't mean you can't get really tough about certain issues, but you have to recognize you need the data and intelligence. And The Real Face of Construction comes out with some very interesting facts regionally about what's needed, what the challenges are. Retrofit, I'm with you, Sarah, absolutely essential. Our conservation conference generated some really practical stuff. And we did have a conversation there about what messages we take and how we find the joined up thinking within government to take it forward. And one of the important things about the memorandums of understanding we've got, and this consensual talking, I think are approaching in the industry a point where if people say, but we don't know who to talk to in construction because there are so many institutions and so many people and it's fragmented, we're reaching the point where we can say, we are a group representing this significant section. How do we talk to all the appropriate people in one place at the policy end? And that's high on my agenda, and we are working towards that. Take a look, Sarah, if you're interested in the retrofit, and I had a great trip to Manchester a few weeks ago talking about this. We need to join up and support. So keep exchanging information, and we are looking at I believe in impact. Not another report to stick on the shelf with the other 15. What can we actually do? And I think there are some opportunities to do it. And I won't be backwards in coming forwards in speaking to the right people.
Yeah, I know there's a massive movement towards retrofit and regen projects and things like that. I've got a client who's mad keen on it at the moment. But it requires the whole industry to get on board. And he got very frustrated with the project he was working on because there was one element that he wanted to be retrofitted and using recycled products, and and the agents on the project who were going to sell the building were like, "Oh, we can't have that. It needs to be shiny and new." And there were so many conflicting interests across the industry, and that's the challenge.
And they're out of touch. I mean, to show that it's on the national agenda, I don't know how many people in the virtual room. I find this very odd not seeing people. I like to see people. Oh, was it Sarah Fox?
Yeah.
Oh, hello, Sarah. Right. Oh, yeah, we know each other. Hello, Sarah. The first 2 pages of one of the sections of the Financial Times last weekend was devoted to retrofitting. I read the FT every weekend. It's the best weekend paper, and it's real paper rather than looking at a screen again. So that's good for you. It also has a crossword, which stops me getting Alzheimer's. Well, that's the theory anyway. But what was interesting about it was there were 2 pages dedicated to the challenges of retrofitting. And they made the point that the system, it used to be 1,254 local authority conservation people in place and planners, and now it's dropped to 554. The length of time getting permission and approval for doing what you want to do, the issues around whether you're grade 2 listed or an AONB, very significant. I have to raise EPCs, and the reality check for an EPC, sorry for those who don't know, environmental performance certificate, the impact of that being raised to see. How do you do that if you're in a home that is built of Cotswold stone with no cavity walls, and some bright spark comes along and says, put cladding on the outside? It is a very complex issue, and there's a lot of frustration out there, and we need to increase the knowledge on how to do it. But it's a huge, it's an industry opportunity. I mean, we're talking about getting out of recession. We need to find the way of streamlining the system, delivering what's needed without doing more harm, being pragmatic, being realistic, having the skills, and having a workforce that doesn't just know about building from scratch, but understands how to deal with existing buildings. We just have too many of them not to do it. But it's a speaking as a marketer, it's a huge growth area, but it will only work if we have the underpinning structures and approvals and mechanisms to help it through. I shall get off the soapbox. Sorry, Stuart, am I throwing your time completely
Brilliant.
to pot?
Oh, yeah, no. I mean, I think I'm going to have to wrap it up there, because there are a couple of more questions that I'll try and get answered for you, John. But I've just put a link in the chat, because I asked my colleague Caris to do this while we were talking, but we didn't actually specifically mention it. But if people haven't, just going back to diversity and inclusion very briefly, there is a charter that the CIOB launched a few months ago, or it might even have been nearly a year ago now. But if companies and people on this call are interested, do take a look at the link that I've just put in the chat there, because there is a whole charter that you can sign up to show your commitment to diversity and inclusion. And there's lots of these sorts of things going around at the moment, but do take a look at it. And if you think you can commit to it and you can get involved, then, and I think that's the other thing, is I was talking to somebody last night and saying, it's all very well signing these bits of paper, but actually you need to read it and make sure that you can commit to it and part in it, because otherwise it's fairly meaningless. But yeah.
Can I just add quickly there, the really important thing about that, great idea. What I love about it, and it's led by Mark Harrison, who's a CIOB lead on this, who's excellent man. We recognize the industry isn't just tier 1 contractors. And I think the really important thing about this EDI, so many of these initiatives are based on the theory that you've got an HR department and a standards department, and you've got a resource budget. And many people will say it's not for the likes of us, this doesn't work. The important thing about the EDI charter is we know that much of the industry are small and medium enterprises. And you have to be realistic about what you can actually do. So it's very practical, and it recognizes this isn't for the people with the resources. There's something in it that you can all do and can sign up to, and just ask questions or call for support, because it's practical. I had to run a business and keep a staff and win work and deliver work. So I don't do this women's stuff because it's pink and fluffy. I'm a realist. I employ the right person for the job. But there are things we can do, and we can do them that make sense.
Brilliant. Thank you very much indeed. And on that note, which perfectly finishes off the conversation, thank you very much. I'm sure we could have spent an hour and a half or 2 hours talking about this and all the various subjects. It's nice that we touched on the retrofit and regen and all the other things that we spoke about, not just diversity and inclusion, which obviously is very important to us and to Sandi. Thank you all for joining us this morning. And we'll, as I say, we'll pop this on YouTube and the various places. We've also started turning these into podcasts as well, so it'll be a YouTube and a podcast very soon. Thank you for joining us. Thank you very much indeed to Sandi, who's a very busy person, as the CIOB told me last week. And we'll see you all again soon. Keep an eye out for what the next Construction Cast will be. We're not quite sure at the moment, but hopefully it'll be in a few weeks' time, and we'll see you there. Thank you very much, Sandi.
Thank you, Stuart, and thanks to everybody, and thanks for your messages. Stay safe. Bye.
All right.